Is Catherine Moore, and I am back to talk about the Board of Ordained Ministry for the Texas Annual Conference Administration and the District's Committee on Ministry with the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Denomination in Houston, Texas. I grew up within the Texas Annual Conference administration because my father, John Chester Dowden, was an ordained clergy employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration in Houston, Texas. And he was also a child molester. He was not the only clergy within the Texas Annual Conference that also had a secret life as an abuser behind closed doors. And I experienced, excuse me, I experienced retaliation from the Texas Annual Conference administration for exposing their history of employing more than one clergy who was a sexual predator. There is clearly a problem that is not being recognized in an administration, a large administration at that, of people that are highly educated. When multiple clergy are employed under their administration that are capable of sexually assaulting minors. And I am a survivor of sexual assault by a clergy who was my father, who was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration and placed on assignment at multiple churches. I also went through a custody trial because I married a highly abusive man named Carl Edward Anthony, who has repeatedly told me he wishes I didn't exist. He said he's told our sons, while talking to me on the phone, that they would all be better off if I was not around. Fortunately, my current husband does not agree with that, and he does not share this opinion with my ex-husband, Carl Edward Anthony. But I would invite Carl Edward Anthony to share this with my husband if he would like to discuss this with my husband. But I know that Carl Edward Anthony is too much of a coward to do that. Anyway, moving forward. After I lost custody, I was I was ordered into supervised visitation based on false accusations by my ex-husband, Carl Edward Anthony. And I was warned by Harrison Fisher, an attorney that I had spoke with, about speaking out against the Texas Annual Conference, and that if it got out in the media, that they would tell the media that I was mentally ill, and they would say that I was not capable of caring for our sons, and that they would help my ex-husband, Carl Edward Anthony, who is a child abuser himself, get custody, get our sons away from me, was what he said. So after I lost custody, I was forced into supervised visitation under the Domestic Relations Office of Harris County, and my visitation started out at South Main Baptist Church. I was sent an email out of the blue months after that. I would say maybe 3 months after that, and I still have the emails, ordering me by the Domestic Relations Office to visit my kids at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church that was under the Texas Annual Conference administration, which is the same administration that employed my father who sexually assaulted me. Why would I visit my kids at a United Methodist Church that was under the same administration that employed my father who sexually assaulted me? Why would I be visiting them at supervised visitation at a United Methodist Church that employed my father at a United Methodist church that was under an administration that employed my father, who sexually assaulted me? Well, because they like to punish anybody that survives sexual assault by one of their United Methodist clergy, especially if they speak out against them. They also they like to retaliate against any victim of abuse from any of their clergy that are employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration. I was also sexually harassed at South Main Baptist Church during the supervised visitation by a domestic relations employee called Jorge, which I like to call Pornhay, or Jorge, Whorejay. And I was also sexually harassed by a guy named Shane, who was a visiting parent at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church in front of the staff of St. Stephen's United Methodist Church, and also in front of the employees of the domestic relations office. And I was also followed to the restroom. I am going to read another article about Kirby John Caldwell and what he was convicted of. All right. Now, I have spoken about Michael Tabb, who murdered his wife in Troop, Texas. He was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration, and he was convicted of murder and sentenced to 55 years in prison. I've also spoke about Kendall Graham, who sexually assaulted a young girl when she was a minor, and he and his wife lured her into their home under the guise of telling her that they were going to adopt her and provide a loving home for her, and he lured her in to sexually assault her. I also spoke about Pearland United Methodist Church and how it was ignored, that it was reported that an employee of the Pearland United Methodist Church sexually abused a minor who was a male, and provided alcohol. And this was also under the Texas Annual Conference administration. So Michael Tabb, Pearland United Methodist Church, Kendall Graham, and my father, John Chester Dowden, all four of those were heavily associated with the Texas Annual Conference because they were employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration. And Pearland United Methodist Church is one of the congregations that is under the Texas Annual Conference administration, and so is St. Stephen's United Methodist Church, that allows parents to be exploited and abused in their church through the supervised visitation program. So now I am going to read about Kirby John Caldwell. Let me see. All right, here we go. Houston pastor convicted in $3.6 million fraud case returns to megachurch after prison release. So here's what I have to say about that. The church that they are referring to is not, okay, Windsor Village is not a mega church. And it's very convenient for the Texas Annual Conference that this is stated in the media. It's not a mega church. It may appear to be because of the size of the congregation, but it is not. Windsor Village is a congregation that is also under the Texas Annual Conference administration, and it is one of the larger congregations that is under their administration, along with the fact that it is just like the rest of the churches that would pay apportionments, which is the same thing as a tithe, to the Texas Annual Conference, and they pay these apportionments annually. So if the Windsor Village United Methodist Church were to separate from the Texas Annual Conference, that would be a huge loss of revenue for the Texas Annual Conference. So the Texas Annual Conference would not want this to happen. And there are certain protections for the Windsor Village United Methodist Church while they are under a large administration, such as the Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist denomination. All right. This article is by Brianna Willis, and it is with KTRK Channel 13, Wednesday, August 6, 2025. Houston pastor Kirby John Caldwell has returned to his megachurch after his early release from prison last year after pleading guilty to wire fraud. Now, at Windsor Village, he is still being allowed to preach, which I am not quite sure, but I think that is poor ethics. I think it is a conflict of interest regarding the Texas Annual Conference and their policies, because they have such strict rules in allowing people to become ordained in the conference administration. And, they will allow someone who is a convicted felon to preach in one of their congregations. Now, he's not employed under the Texas Annual Conference. However, it's interesting that someone who has served prison time would be allowed to preach in a congregation under the Texas Annual Conference administration, but someone who has been sexually assaulted by a clergy employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration would experience retaliation for speaking out, because the Texas Annual Conference administration likes to keep their victims silent. Houston, Texas, KTRK. Houston pastor Kirby John Caldwell has returned to the megachurch he helped build in Southwest Houston. His return to Windsor Village on Sunday comes nearly a year after his release from prison last year after pleading guilty to wire fraud. And there's a related article noted Houston pastor Kirby John Caldwell, released early from prison megachurch, says Caldwell, who once served as a spiritual advisor to President W. Bush and Barack Obama, served time behind bars in Beaumont for defrauding investors out of nearly $3.6 million. Federal court documents show Caldwell's co-conspirator was responsible for finding investors. Caldwell says no one from his church was defrauded. Court documents show Caldwell paid full restitution. Court documents accused Caldwell and his co-defendant of writing $25,000 out of a church account, of wiring $25,000 out of a church account. Caldwell repaid that money, a representative told ABC 13. Okay. Caldwell took to the mic on Sunday. I went all the way to Beaumont, Texas, looked all around, couldn't find nobody, Caldwell said. His congregation and friends welcomed him with open arms. Of course, but the Texas Annual Conference despises anyone who's a sexual assault survivor from any of their clergy. It's such a blessing to have our visionary pastor back at church. We are excited. We are so excited, a member of the church said. My friend is home and free to use all of his skills and gifts to not only pastor this church, but pastor this community. Pastor and Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver said. Isn't that interesting? Because Kirby John Caldwell is no longer employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration. He is no longer on assignment at Windsor Village United Methodist Church through the Texas Annual Conference administration. His wife is. Calling my husband back because he was disconnected. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm going to continue. Okay. And I'm going to read that statement again because that's an important statement. My friend is home and free to use all of his skills and gifts to not only pastor this church, which he is no longer the senior pastor of, but pastor this community. Pastor and Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver said. Cleaver and others in the community said they believe Caldwell has repented and is touched by God to continue his work. But if you are a sexual assault survivor from a clergy of the Texas Annual Conference administration, you are labeled as a disgrace. And they will retaliate if you speak out. There's a big word that we use biblically and theologically, and it is forgiveness. Interesting. And somebody who cannot move past that maybe should rethink their commitment to God, Cleaver said. The church announced that Caldwell will deliver his first sermon back next Sunday. I want to look at that statement. There's a big word we use biblically and theologically, and it is forgiveness. And somebody who cannot move past that maybe should rethink their commitment to God, Cleaver said. Now, I really hate the word forgiveness. I don't forgive the conference. I don't forgive my parents. I'm good with that. I'm okay with that. And I'm not quite sure what I believe anymore about God. And if there is one, I'm sure as hell not one of his favorites. I am definitely not one of God's chosen people. Pretty much figured that out by now. So I want to look at that statement. Forgiveness And so what would the Texas Annual Conference, what would need to be forgiven of anyone who survived? Okay. What would need to be forgiven of anybody who survived a sexual assault by a United Methodist minister employed under the Texas Annual Conference? What would the Texas Annual Conference need to forgive a survivor of sexual assault from one of their clergy for? What is it that a sexual assault survivor of a United Methodist minister is responsible for that the Texas Annual Conference administration needs to forgive? And if the Texas Annual Conference needed to forgive a sexual assault survivor, I mean, if they don't need to forgive a sexual assault survivor, I mean, let's go out on a limb here and let's say that sexual assault is not someone's fault. Even mine, that's a shocker. Let's assume that they're not responsible for being sexually assaulted by a clergy that's employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration. So wouldn't the Texas Annual Conference administration need to look at their commitment to God if they feel that they cannot forgive a sexual assault survivor? And even worse, if they feel that somehow the sexual assault survivor is responsible for what happened to them, therefore they need to retaliate against said sexual assault survivor. With all of that said, wouldn't the Texas Annual Conference need to take a serious look at their policies and their commitment to God? That would be a very good question for Bishop Cynthia Harvey. Next, I'm going to read page 11. Well, it says page 5 on here. Okay. Yeah, it's page 5. I'm going to read on let's see, the district's committee on ministry with the Board of Ordained Ministry. Okay, I see. All right, the numbers on the pages are weird. All right. Before the candidate is invited into the interview environment, committee members should briefly discuss the information they received prior to the interview, including personal data inventory and any changes in contact information, college, university, or seminary, and suggest possible interview questions which will help the candidate further articulate continued fitness for ministry, progress in studies if candidate for ordination. Confirm that the candidate's current transcript was received and is satisfactory. When the candidate is invited to enter, committee members should greet the candidate warmly, graciously acknowledge any obvious anxiety, state purpose of the interview honestly and openly, begin with prayer. During the interview, committee members should express interest in the candidate's present situation, ask candidate and about progress in his or her studies if candidate for ordination. Ask questions which will help the committee discern whether or not the candidate is still fit for ministry. During the interview, committee members should not ask questions which might be interpreted as discriminatory. In example, questions which suggest a prejudice against a candidate's age, gender, ethnicity, marital status, level of education, and social status, etc. If any committee member asks an inappropriate question, either the chair or advocate should feel free to invite the committee member to ask another question or to ask the question in a more appropriate way. At the end of the interview, the chair or another committee member should thank the candidate for his or her time, inform the candidate when to expect a decision, both written and oral, end with prayer. After recertification interview, after the candidate is dismissed, debrief the interview and make a decision. You will need to make one of the following decisions. 1, candidate is fit for ministry and progressing in studies. In this case, the candidate is recertified. Recertified candidates seeking ordination as deacon or elders will continue to work with certified mentors and complete theological education. Following the steps on the certified candidate checklist, they will return to your committee annually for recertification. Recertified candidates seeking appointment as local pastors who do not plan to attend seminary and seek ordination will continue to request for and await appointment. They will return to your committee annually for recertification. Candidate is no longer fit for ministry and/or is not progressing in his or her studies. Committee does not expect candidate to become fit or resume studies in the foreseeable future. Committee does not expect candidate to become effective in ministry in the foreseeable future. In this case, candidate is discontinued. Once a decision is made, the committee should decide who will inform the candidate of the committee's decision verbally and in writing. Inform the candidate verbally as soon as possible within 24 hours. Inform the candidate in writing as soon as possible within 10 days. If the candidate is certified, include a copy of or link to the certified candidate checklist. Regardless of decisions made, the candidate should know the committee to be a caring community of Christians, unless you are a survivor of sexual assault by a United Methodist clergy who was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration. And they would even have the audacity to assume that you need forgiveness for being a sexual assault survivor, and then assume you're not worthy of their love or forgiveness, because they're all about blaming the victim and retaliating against the victim. Okay. When a difficult decision is made and the candidate is not encouraged to continue, a personal contact should be planned for the days that follow. Vocational alternatives can be explored with the candidate and assistance given in locating other employment. Candidates who experience difficulties in dealing with the board's decision should be informed about any available pastoral care options. Registrar or district administrative assistant should complete the one-page DCOM action report and forward it to candidacy and recruitment assistant as soon as possible within 10 days. Before the relicensing interview, by February 1st, schedule district committee on ordained ministry relicensing interviews. Contact recertification interviews are usually scheduled in person in the spring. However, fall interviews are acceptable. Contact local pastors currently appointed in your district to determine how many interviews you'll need to schedule. Plan to allow at least 45 minutes per interview, at least 30 minutes for the actual interview, plus a total of at least 15 minutes for DCOM discussion before and or after the interview. Divide committee if necessary, so that no more than 8 members are present in any interview. By February 15th, notify DCOM and local pastors with interview dates and times. Give DCOM and local pastors detailed information about the interview location. Tell candidates what they should expect and what they should wear. No later than 2 weeks prior to the interview, local pastors should forward to you current license, most recent course of study transcripts, any changes in contact information or appointment, any other district requirements. 2 weeks before the interviews, confirm that all local pastor information has been received. Forward candidates information to DCOM members who will be present during that interview. Personal data inventory. Any changes in contact information or appointment. DCOM members should prepare for interviews by prayerfully reviewing candidates' information. During the relicensing interview, extend hospitality. Create a hospitable waiting environment. Choose one committee member to stay in the waiting area for local pastors, several serving as host. Hosts should welcome local pastors, offering beverages and healthy snacks, answer any questions, make local pastors feel at home. Create a hospitable interview environment with simple altar space, chairs arranged in a circle, and no more than 8 committee members. If a clergy mentor is not available to accompany each candidate as his or her advocate during the interview, choose another committee member to serve as advocate. Before the candidate is invited into the interview environment, committee members should briefly discuss the information they received prior to the interview, including personal data inventory and any changes in contact information or appointment, and suggest possible interview questions which will help the candidate further articulate continued fitness for ministry, continued readiness for licensed ministry, progress in course of study. Confirm that the candidate's license and current course of study of transcripts were received and are satisfactory. When the candidate is invited to enter, committee members should greet the candidate warmly, graciously acknowledge any obvious anxiety. So, with all of that, my dad had a brother named Richard Dowden who was approved as a local pastor under the Texas Annual Conference administration. They will approve someone, a man whose brother is a child molester that was employed under their administration, to be a local pastor, to be a leader of a congregation. But they will cast out his niece, who was a daughter of a United Methodist clergy named John Chester Dowden, that was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration as a United Methodist clergy of the United Methodist denomination in Houston, Texas. And the next thing I want to say is, with all of the sarcasm that I have in me, because I have a lot, I would like to apologize to the Texas Annual Conference from the bottom of my heart for being a survivor of sexual assault from one of their United Methodist clergy, John Chester Dowden, and being an embarrassment to them.